Um, I'm Paige, 32 years old, and family meant everything to me. My sister Amanda and I were inseparable, growing up sharing secrets and dreams. I never imagined she would one day accuse me of destroying her marriage to Richard, turning our entire family against me without even hearing my side of the story. What happened 3 years later shocked everyone, proving that karma always finds its way back. Before I share how my entire family betrayed me and what happened 3 years later, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories like mine. Growing up in Minneapolis, Amanda and I shared more than just our parents' genes. Being only 2 years apart, we were basically joined at the hip from the moment she could walk. Our middle class family wasn't wealthy, but our parents made sure we never lacked love or support. I can still remember the floral wallpaper in the bedroom we shared until I was 14, with twin beds pushed against opposite walls and a nightstand between them, where we'd leave secret notes for each other. Amanda was always the social butterfly. 2 years older than me, she effortlessly collected friends and admirers, while I preferred smaller circles and deeper connections. Despite our differences, we protected each other fiercely. When Samantha Parker made fun of my braces in 7th grade, it was Amanda who confronted her in the cafeteria, hands on hips, daring her to say one more word about her little sister. Our personalities complemented each other perfectly. I was the practical one, planning our adventures down to the last detail, while Amanda brought spontaneity and excitement. During summer breaks, I'd create elaborate schedules for our days, and Amanda would inevitably convince me to throw them away and just follow our hearts. Somehow, between my caution and her daring, we always found the perfect balance. When Amanda started college, money was tight. Our parents had saved some for our education, but not nearly enough. I remember Amanda calling me in tears during her sophomore year, worried she'd have to drop out because she couldn't afford textbooks. Without hesitation, I sent her the money I'd been saving for a trip to California. Her education was more important than my vacation plans. That was just who we were to each other back then. It was during her final year of college that Amanda met Richard. He was 5 years older, already established in his financial consulting business, and exuded confidence that seemed to fill every room. I still remember the first time she brought him home for Sunday dinner. He arrived with an expensive bottle of wine for our parents and complimented my mother's cooking with such charm that she was practically glowing by dessert. Something about Richard made me uneasy from the beginning. Perhaps it was the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, or how he subtly directed every conversation back to his accomplishments. When Amanda wasn't looking, I caught glimpses of a different man behind the charming facade. The way he checked his expensive watch when anyone else was speaking, the slight curl of his lip when our father talked about his factory job. I tried to voice my concerns gently. "Are you sure he's the one, Amanda? You've only known him for a few months?" But Amanda was completely smitten. "You don't understand Paige. He's different when we're alone. He talks about our future, about building something together. No one's ever seen me the way Richard does." So I swallowed my doubts. After all, who was I to question my sister's happiness? Maybe I was just being overprotective. Maybe Richard was exactly what Amanda needed. I decided to support her choice and welcome him into our family. 13 months after they met, Amanda and Richard were engaged. The proposal was exactly what you'd expect from Richard: a weekend trip to New York, dinner at an exclusive restaurant, and a diamond ring that must have cost more than our parents' car. As maid of honor, I threw myself into planning the perfect bridal shower and bachelorette party, determined to be the supportive sister Amanda deserved. Their wedding was the most lavish event our family had ever been part of. Richard's parents had connections and money, and they spared no expense. The country club venue, the 6-tier cake, Amanda's designer gown that made her look like a princess stepping out of a fairy tale. Standing beside her at the altar, I fought back tears as she recited her vows. Despite my lingering concerns, I prayed I was wrong about Richard. I prayed he would make her as happy as she deserved to be. The first 2 years of their marriage seemed picture perfect, at least from the outside. They bought a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood. They took exotic vacations twice a year. Amanda quit her job at Richard's insistence, saying his income was more than enough for both of them. On social media, their life looked like a dream come true. But during our sisters only lunches, I started noticing changes in Amanda. The constant checking of her phone when it buzzed, the way she seemed to measure her words carefully before speaking. Her vibrant personality seemed dimmed somehow, like someone had turned down her inner light. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd quickly paste on a smile and change the subject. "Richard and I are thinking about renovating the kitchen," she'd say, or, "Did I tell you about the charity gala we attended last weekend?" I didn't push. Amanda had always come to me when she needed to talk, and I trusted she would do the same if something was truly wrong. But watching my once confident, outspoken sister become increasingly quiet and cautious broke my heart in ways I couldn't fully understand yet. Little did I know these subtle changes were just the beginning of a nightmare that would eventually tear our entire family apart. 2 years into their marriage, the cracks in Amanda and Richard's seemingly perfect relationship began to show. It started with a phone call on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was just settling in with a glass of wine and my favorite show when Amanda's name flashed on my phone screen. "Paige." Her voice was small and shaky. "Can I come over?" An hour later, she was sitting on my couch, mascara streaking down her cheeks, as she finally opened up about what life with Richard was really like. "He monitors every penny I spend," she confessed, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "I have to keep receipts for everything, even a coffee. Last week, he got angry because I bought a new dress without consulting him first." As the evening wore on, more disturbing details emerged. Richard had opinions about everything from Amanda's hairstyle to her choice of friends. He'd make cutting remarks about her appearance in private, then shower her with compliments in public. He'd check her phone regularly, questioning who she was texting and why. Gradually, she'd stopped reaching out to friends to avoid the interrogations that followed. "I don't even recognize myself anymore, Paige," she whispered. "Sometimes I look in the mirror and wonder what happened to the person I used to be." I became Amanda's emotional lifeline, the one person she could be honest with about her crumbling marriage. We'd meet for coffee when Richard was at work, or she'd call me when he was on business trips. I tried to be supportive without overstepping, listening to her frustrations, while gently suggesting she stand up for herself more. That Thanksgiving at our parents' house was when I witnessed Richard's controlling behavior firsthand. Amanda had spent hours helping our mother prepare the meal, making her famous apple pie from scratch. When Richard took his first bite, his face hardened. "Didn't we talk about cutting back on sugar?" he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You know how easily you put on weight." The table fell silent. Amanda's face flushed red as she put down her own fork, her pie untouched. Our mother quickly changed the subject, but the damage was done. After dinner, I found Amanda crying in our old bedroom. I couldn't stay silent anymore. While Amanda was helping with dishes, I cornered Richard in the living room. "That comment about the pie was completely inappropriate," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "You embarrassed Amanda in front of her family." Richard's charming smile didn't waver, but his eyes turned cold. "I'm looking out for my wife's best interests, Paige." "Something you wouldn't understand being single. When you're married, you'll realize that honesty is important." His dismissive tone made my blood boil, but I kept my composure. "There's a difference between honesty and cruelty. Amanda deserves respect." He simply chuckled and walked away, rejoining the family as if our conversation had never happened. A few weeks later, Amanda called me in tears again. She wanted to save her marriage, but didn't know how. I suggested marriage counseling, thinking a professional might help Richard see how his behavior was affecting Amanda. "I already brought it up," she said. He laughed and said counselors are for weak people who can't solve their own problems. He said if I'm unhappy, that's my issue to deal with. As months passed, things only got worse. Richard's financial consulting business started experiencing problems. He lost several major clients, and the stress amplified his controlling tendencies at home. Amanda walked on eggshells, afraid that anything she said or did might trigger his anger. Then came the revelation that shattered any remaining illusion of their marriage. Amanda showed up at my apartment unannounced one evening, her face pale and eyes vacant. "He's been sleeping with his administrative assistant," she said flatly, collapsing onto my couch. "For months, maybe longer. I found messages on his laptop." I held her as she sobbed, her body shaking with the weight of betrayal. When she finally calmed down, I asked the question I'd been holding back for too long. Amanda, is this marriage worth saving? Is Richard the person you want to spend your life with? She looked up at me, something shifting in her expression. For the first time in months, I saw a glimpse of my strong, determined sister breaking through the shell of fear she'd been living in. No, she whispered. I don't think he is. I squeezed her hand. Then maybe it's time to consider your options. You deserve so much better than this, Amanda. You always have. What I didn't realize then was that my honest advice given out of love and concern would soon be twisted against me in ways I could never have imagined. The day Amanda finally decided to file for divorce was both terrifying and liberating for her. We sat together at my kitchen table as she filled out the paperwork, her hand trembling but determined. After discovering more evidence of Richard's affairs, not just with his assistant, but with two other women, Amanda had reached her breaking point. I feel like I'm jumping off a cliff, she whispered, signing her name on the final page. But staying would kill me slowly. I squeezed her shoulder. You're doing the right thing, and I'm here for you every step of the way. When Richard was served the divorce papers at his office, his reaction was explosive. He called Amanda, screaming so loudly that I could hear him from across the room. You ungrateful bitch! His voice crackled through the phone speaker. After everything I've given you, this is how you repay me. Your family put you up to this, didn't they? Your nosy sister has been poisoning you against me from day one. Amanda was shaking by the time the call ended. That night, she accepted my offer to stay in my spare bedroom until things settled down. Just temporarily, she insisted, though we both knew there was no going back to the house she'd shared with Richard. What followed was one of the ugliest divorces our family had ever witnessed. Richard fought Amanda on every single asset from their home to the wedding china. He hired an aggressive attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces, while Amanda struggled to afford decent legal representation. He's hiding money, she confided one evening. I know he's been moving assets around for months preparing for this, but I can't prove it without spending thousands on forensic accountants. To make matters worse, Richard began spreading rumors within their social circle. According to him, Amanda was the unfaithful one. He claimed she'd been sleeping with her old college boyfriend, that she was unstable and materialistic. People they'd considered friends for years began taking sides, most believing Richard's compelling performance as the wronged husband. The stress of the divorce proceedings began wearing on Amanda. She became increasingly bitter, her anger needing somewhere to land. I noticed her gaze lingering on me sometimes, a strange calculation happening behind her eyes. The first hint of trouble came after a particularly brutal day in court. Richard's lawyer had painted Amanda as a gold digger who'd married for money and was now trying to clean him out. We were driving home when Amanda suddenly said, "You know, if you hadn't kept encouraging me to leave him, maybe we could have worked things out." I nearly swerved off the road. What, Amanda? He was cheating on you, multiple times. He was controlling and emotionally abusive. Maybe I exaggerated some of that, she muttered. Maybe if I'd tried harder, been more patient. I recognized Richard's manipulation tactics in her words, but before I could respond, she changed the subject. The moment passed, but something had shifted between us. A week later, Richard reached out to our parents. He'd never been particularly close with them during the marriage, often finding excuses to skip family gatherings. But suddenly he was calling them regularly, dropping by with small gifts, presenting himself as the devastated husband, blindsided by Amanda's decision to leave. Your father and I had such a nice lunch with Richard yesterday, my mother mentioned during our weekly call. The poor man is heartbroken. He showed us the anniversary trip to Italy he'd been planning to surprise Amanda with before all this happened. Mom, you know that's not the real Richard, right? I said, alarm bells ringing in my head. He's manipulating you. Paige, there are two sides to every story, she replied, her tone suddenly cool. We're trying to stay neutral here. The final blow came when Amanda borrowed my phone to call her lawyer while hers was charging. After she left, I noticed she'd been looking through my text messages, specifically the supportive texts I'd sent her over the past year, encouraging her to stand up for herself, documenting Richard's behavior. and eventually suggesting she consider divorce if things didn't improve. The next day, Amanda showed up at my apartment, her face contorted with rage. She thrust printed copies of my texts in my face. "You've been planning this all along," she shouted. "You never liked Richard. You were just waiting for the opportunity to break us up." "Amanda, that's ridiculous," I said, stunned by the accusation. "Those messages were me supporting you when you came to me for help." "You were jealous," she continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Jealous that I had a successful husband, a beautiful home, everything you didn't have. So you planted all these ideas in my head, made me doubt my marriage, convinced me Richard was this monster." My hands were shaking. "Amanda, Richard was cheating on you. He admitted it. Only after I confronted him. After you convinced me to spy on him to look for problems, you ruined everything." She stormed out, leaving me standing in my living room, surrounded by the printed evidence of my support being twisted into something sinister. Little did I know this was just the beginning of my nightmare. 2 days later, at our cousin's birthday dinner, Amanda publicly accused me of deliberately sabotaging her marriage. In front of our entire extended family, she claimed I had been secretly in love with Richard for years and had methodically poisoned her marriage to break them up. The shocked silence that followed was deafening. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my response to this outrageous claim. But as I looked around at the faces of people who had known me my entire life, I realized with horror that some of them actually seemed to be considering the possibility that Amanda was right. And just like that, the foundation of my family life began to crumble beneath my feet. The family dinner that changed everything happened at my parents' house, a place that had always represented safety and unconditional love to me. My mother had called saying we needed to clear the air after Amanda's public accusation. I arrived hopeful that reason would prevail, that my family would see through the absurdity of her claims. I couldn't have been more wrong. The moment I walked in, I sensed the hostile atmosphere. Amanda sat at the dining table, eyes red but chin raised defiantly. My parents stood behind her literally and figuratively. Our aunt and uncle were there too, along with 2 cousins. No one moved to hug me or even properly greet me. "We think it's time you explain yourself, Paige." My father began, his voice uncharacteristically cold. Before I could respond, Amanda launched into a prepared speech. "I have evidence that Paige has been undermining my marriage from the beginning. She's been telling me Richard doesn't love me, that he's controlling, that I should leave him. She's been documenting everything, building a case against him." She slid a folder across the table filled with printed copies of our text conversations over the years, highlighted and taken completely out of context. "Amanda came to me for help," I said, my voice shaking with disbelief. Everything in those messages was in response to her telling me Richard was controlling her, criticizing her, cheating on her. I was supporting her, not manipulating her. "That's not true," Amanda cried. She twisted everything I said about Richard. Normal marriage problems became abuse in her mind. And then she kept planting ideas, making me suspicious, pushing me to spy on him. My mother placed a hand on Amanda's shoulder. "Why would you encourage her to divorce Richard without even suggesting counseling first, Paige?" "I did suggest counseling. Richard refused." I looked around the table, desperate for someone to remember the truth. "You all saw how he treated her. That Thanksgiving when he humiliated her about the pie. The Christmas party when he kept checking her phone and wouldn't let her have more than 1 glass of wine." My aunt shook her head. "He was looking out for her health, Paige. Some people would appreciate a husband who cares that much." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Amanda," I turned to my sister directly. "You know the truth. You told me about the affairs. You showed me the messages he sent those women." I was confused. Amanda countered, tears streaming down her face now. "You made me believe things that weren't true. And now my marriage is over and it's your fault." Then came the accusation that stunned me into silence. "Just admit it, Paige," Amanda said, her voice suddenly steady. "You've always wanted Richard for yourself. That's why you tried to break us up." The absolute absurdity of the claim made me laugh, which was exactly the wrong reaction. My family's faces hardened, interpreting my laughter as callousness rather than shock. "That's ridiculous," I finally managed. I've never been interested in Richard. I've always thought he wasn't good enough for you. See? Amanda pointed at me triumphantly. She's always hated him, always tried to come between us. My father cleared his throat. Richard called us yesterday. He said he's willing to consider reconciliation even after all this. He still loves Amanda. I stared at my father in disbelief. He's manipulating all of you. That's what he does. That's enough, my mother interrupted. Paige, we think it might be best if you give the family some space right now, until you're ready to take responsibility for your actions. I looked around the table at the faces of people I'd loved and trusted my entire life. Not one of them was willing to consider my side of the story. Not one of them remembered all the times Amanda had come to me in tears over Richard's behavior. They had completely rewritten history to make me the villain. So that's it. You're choosing to believe this fantasy over the truth, over me. My voice broke on the final word. The silence was my answer. In the weeks that followed, I was systematically excluded from family life. My calls went unanswered. My texts received brief cold responses. I was uninvited for my cousin's wedding. My name was conspicuously absent from the family Thanksgiving plans. I tried reaching out to individual family members, hoping one-on-one conversations might break through the collective delusion. My cousin Jessica, who had always been close to me, agreed to meet for coffee. But even she seemed distant and uncomfortable. "I want to believe you, Paige," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "But Amanda is absolutely devastated. And Richard has been so understanding through all of this. It's hard to see him as this monster you're describing." "You don't have to see him as a monster," I pleaded. "Just consider the possibility that Amanda is misdirecting her anger, that Richard might not be telling the complete truth." Jessica fidgeted with her coffee cup. "Your parents think you should see someone you know, a therapist. They're worried about you." That was when I realized how thoroughly Richard had orchestrated this narrative. In their minds, I wasn't just wrong. I was unwell, delusional, obsessed. Richard had taken my genuine concern for my sister and twisted it into something pathological. The final blow came at Christmas. Despite not receiving an invitation to the family gathering, I showed up at my parents' house with gifts and hope for reconciliation. My mother answered the door but didn't move to let me in. "Now isn't a good time, Paige," she said, her eyes darting behind her. "Richard and Amanda are here. We're trying to help them work things out." "Mom, please," I said, my voice breaking. "Just let me explain my side." "There's nothing to explain," she replied firmly. "Amanda showed us everything, the way you've been trying to come between them for years. Your father and I think it would be best if you sought help before trying to rejoin family gatherings." As she closed the door, I caught a glimpse of Richard in the background, his arm around Amanda's shoulders, a satisfied smile, playing at the corners of his mouth. He had won. He had turned my entire family against me with lies and manipulation. That night alone in my apartment, I made the hardest decision of my life. I would stop trying to make my family believe me. I would stop subjecting myself to their rejection and judgment. If they couldn't see the truth, if they couldn't even give me the benefit of the doubt after a lifetime of love and loyalty, then perhaps they weren't the family I thought they were. With tears streaming down my face, I blocked their numbers on my phone. All except one, my best friend Taylor, who had stood by me through everything. "You need to protect yourself," she told me that night over the phone. "You can't set yourself on fire to keep people warm who won't even acknowledge you're burning." She was right. It was time to walk away from the toxic family dynamic and find a way to rebuild my life without them. I just had no idea how painful that journey would be, or how completely my life would transform in the process. The first few months after being cast out of my family were the darkest of my life. I'd wake up each morning with a brief moment of normalcy before remembering the gaping hole where my family relationships used to be. The pain was physical, like someone had carved out a piece of my chest. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. I called in sick to work so often that my supervisor finally sat me down for a serious conversation. "Whatever's going on in your personal life, Paige, you need to address it. Your work is suffering, and we can't carry you indefinitely." That wake-up call pushed me to seek professional help. Dr. Larson, a therapist specializing in family trauma, became my lifeline. During our first session, I poured out the entire story, half expecting her to also doubt my version of events. Instead, she nodded with understanding. What you're describing sounds like a classic family scapegoating dynamic, amplified by your brother-in-law's manipulative behavior. Your sister displaced her anger about her failed marriage onto you, and your family found it easier to accept that narrative than to confront the more complex truth. For the first time in months, I felt validated. Someone believed me. Someone understood what I was experiencing wasn't just a family disagreement, but a profound betrayal and loss. Dr. Larson helped me realize that continuing to fight for my family's understanding might not be the healthiest path forward. Sometimes, she explained gently, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to accept that others may never see your truth and to build a life that doesn't depend on their validation. And as spring turned to summer, a job opportunity arose in Denver, a marketing director position at a growing tech company. It would mean leaving behind the only city I'd ever called home, but perhaps that was exactly what I needed. A fresh start, a place without memories on every corner. "Take it," Taylor urged over brunch the day after my interview. "There's nothing keeping you here anymore, Paige. This could be your chance to rebuild." With Taylor's encouragement and Dr. Larson's support, I accepted the position. Packing up my apartment was surprisingly cathartic, each box representing a deliberate choice about what to bring into my new life. The family photos stayed in a storage unit. I wasn't ready to throw them away, but I couldn't bear to display them either. Denver welcomed me with stunning mountain vistas and the promise of anonymity. No one there knew my story. No one looked at me with pity or judgment. I could simply be Paige, the new marketing director, without the weight of being the family pariah. The early days were lonely. I'd come home to my empty apartment after work and feel the silence pressing in. No family to call, no lifetime of inside jokes to share. I started filling the emptiness with small, deliberate actions. I joined a hiking group. I volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends. I accepted every invitation from coworkers, even when my introverted nature begged me to decline. Slowly, connections formed. My colleague Jasmine invited me to her book club. Mark from the hiking group introduced me to his friends who played trivia every Thursday. My neighbor Elena taught me to make authentic paella. None of these relationships had the depth of family ties, but together they began to form a safety net beneath me. When Thanksgiving approached, the first one I would spend without family, the grief hit me anew. Taylor offered to fly out to Denver, but she had her own family obligations. Instead, Jasmine invited me to her Friendsgiving, a gathering of people who, for various reasons, couldn't be with their families for the holiday. "We're all refugees from somewhere," Jasmine said, as she handed me a glass of wine in her cozy apartment filled with mismatched furniture and twinkling lights. "Family isn't always blood." That night, surrounded by strangers sharing food and stories, I felt a spark of something I hadn't experienced in months: belonging. These people didn't share my history, but they offered acceptance without conditions. They weren't trying to fix me or change my story. They simply made room for me at the table. Christmas was harder. I volunteered for a community dinner serving the homeless, keeping busy to avoid the emptiness. But when I returned to my apartment that evening, the silence was deafening. I broke down sobbing on my kitchen floor, wondering if the pain of this severed connection would ever truly heal. Dating was another challenge entirely. The trust issues stemming from my family's betrayal made it difficult to open up to potential partners. I'd go on first dates and find myself holding back, afraid to share too much of myself, afraid of being misjudged or abandoned again. After several false starts and quick retreats, I met Michael at a charity auction for the animal shelter where I volunteered. He was an architect with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that put me at ease. Unlike other men I'd dated, he didn't press when I evaded questions about my family. He simply noted, "That seems like a complicated topic. I'm here if you ever want to talk about it, but no pressure." 3 dates in, I found myself telling him everything. We were walking along the river after dinner, the city lights reflecting on the water, when the words just started flowing. I expected to see that look I'd grown accustomed to, the slight narrowing of the eyes that signaled disbelief or judgment. Instead, Michael listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, and then said something that caught me completely off guard. "I believe you, Paige, and I'm sorry your family couldn't do the same." Those simple words cracked something open inside me. The validation I'd been seeking from my family for so long came instead from this man who had no obligation to believe me, who had nothing to gain from taking my side. It felt like taking a full breath after months of shallow breathing. As our relationship deepened, Michael introduced me to his family, a boisterous, affectionate clan that welcomed me without reservation. The contrast between their acceptance and my own family's rejection was both healing and painful. His mother hugged me tightly the first time we met. His father asked about my work with genuine interest. His siblings teased me gently, already treating me like one of their own. "Your family is amazing," I told Michael after our first holiday with them. "They're not perfect," he replied with a smile, "but they're good at loving people. It's a skill, you know. Some families never learn it." That insight stayed with me. Perhaps love wasn't just a feeling, but a skill one my family had failed to develop fully. The thought didn't erase the pain of their rejection, but it helped me understand it wasn't because I was unworthy of love. It was because they lacked the capacity to love unconditionally. With therapy, new friendships, a fulfilling career, and a blossoming relationship, I slowly built a life that felt whole despite the missing pieces. I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. Independence became not just a necessity, but a source of pride. I learned to trust my own perceptions again, to believe in my own worth, even when those who should have valued me most had failed to do so. I was finding my way forward, step by uncertain step, never imagining that the truth I'd been fighting for would eventually find its way to the surface without any effort on my part. Exactly 3 years and 2 months after my family disowned me, my phone rang with a call from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I heard a voice I hadn't spoken to in years. "Paige, it's Jessica, your cousin." My heart hammered in my chest. "Jessica, how did you get this number?" "You never blocked me on Facebook. I sent you a message there. But when you didn't respond, I asked a mutual friend for your contact info." She paused. "I need to talk to you about everything that happened." I gripped the phone tightly, unsure if I wanted to reopen those wounds. Michael, sensing my tension from across the room, gave me a questioning look. I covered the mouthpiece. "My cousin," I whispered. "From before." He nodded supportively, and I returned to the call. "I'm listening." Jessica took a deep breath. "You were right about everything. Richard, Amanda, all of it, and the family owes you a massive apology." My legs gave out and I sank onto the couch. What happened? The story Jessica told me unfolded like a karmic reckoning. Richard had remarried just 8 months after his divorce from Amanda was finalized. His new wife, Brittany, was younger, wealthier, and from a prominent local family. Their lavish wedding had been featured in Minneapolis Magazine. Amanda was devastated all over again, Jessica explained. She felt replaced, discarded. But then something unexpected happened. Brittany reached out to Amanda privately. It turned out Richard's second marriage was already crumbling after barely a year. The same controlling behavior, the same emotional manipulation, the same infidelity. But Brittany had something Amanda hadn't: a powerful family who saw through Richard's charm immediately, and a father who happened to be a financial investigator. Brittany's father started looking into Richard's business dealings, Jessica continued. What he found was shocking. Richard had been embezzling from clients for years, including during his marriage to Amanda. He'd also hidden assets during their divorce. The revelation snowballed. Richard was facing not just the collapse of his second marriage, but serious legal charges for financial fraud. And because Amanda's name had been on some of the business accounts during their marriage, she was being questioned by investigators and potentially facing financial ruin herself. Amanda finally broke down and admitted everything to the family, Jessica said. How Richard had been emotionally abusive throughout their marriage, how he'd manipulated her into blaming you for their divorce, how you had only ever tried to support her and protect her. My hand was shaking so badly, I had to put the phone on speaker. And they believed her just like that? They had to, Jessica replied. The evidence against Richard was overwhelming. And once Amanda started telling the truth, everything you'd said made perfect sense. The family is, well, they're ashamed, Paige. They chose the wrong side and they know it. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this vindication I'd stopped hoping for long ago. People have been trying to reach you, Jessica continued. Your parents, Amanda, even some of the aunts and uncles. When they couldn't contact you directly, they asked me to try. A complex mix of emotions swirled through me: validation, anger, grief, and a strange, unexpected relief. The truth had finally come out not because of anything I'd done, but because Richard's true nature couldn't stay hidden forever. What do they want from me now? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. They want to apologize, to try to make amends if possible. Jessica paused. Amanda, especially. She's been through hell, Paige. Richard left her with nothing but debt and damaged relationships. She knows now what you tried to warn her about all along. Part of me wanted to say it was too late, that the damage was done, that I'd built a new life without them, and had no room for people who had abandoned me so completely. But another part, a part I thought had died years ago, stirred with something like hope. I need time to think about this, I finally said. I can't just pick up where we left off. No one expects that, Jessica assured me. Just don't close the door completely, okay? People can change, families can heal. After we hung up, I told Michael everything. He listened quietly, then asked the question I was afraid to answer. What do you want to do, Paige? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to tell them all to go to hell, but another part misses them, he finished for me. That's okay, you know. Missing people who hurt you doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Over the next few weeks, messages began trickling in. Emails from cousins expressing regret for believing the lies. A handwritten letter from my aunt, acknowledging how wrong they'd all been. A text from Amanda simply saying, I'm so sorry, Paige. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know how deeply I regret what I did to you. I read each message, but didn't respond immediately. I needed to establish boundaries to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I wanted with these people who had once been my entire world. Then, without warning, my parents showed up at my door in Denver. Seeing them standing on my doorstep looking older and smaller than I remembered sent a shock through my system. We should have called first, my mother said, her voice trembling. But we were afraid you wouldn't agree to see us. I didn't invite them in immediately. Instead, I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. How did you find my address? Jessica, my father admitted. She wouldn't give us your phone number, but she thought you might want to hear us out in person. A tense silence stretched between us. We were wrong, Paige, my mother finally said, tears spilling down her cheeks. So terribly wrong, and we've spent 3 years without our daughter because of it. You didn't just get something wrong, I replied, my voice shaking despite my efforts to remain calm. You chose not to believe me. You chose another narrative because it was easier, because it didn't require you to confront the truth about Richard. You abandoned me. My father nodded, his eyes downcast. We did, and there's no excuse for that. But if there's any chance, any possibility that you could find it in your heart to let us try to make amends. I looked at these two people who had raised me, who had once been my safe harbor, who had then cast me adrift without a second thought. They were flawed, deeply flawed, but they were still my parents. I can give you 30 minutes, I said, finally stepping aside to let them in. But I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago, and whatever relationship we might rebuild will never be what it was before. As they stepped into my home, the home I'd built without them, I realized that karma hadn't just struck Richard. It had forced everyone who had wronged me to confront the truth they'd been so eager to deny. And while that didn't erase the pain of the past 3 years, it offered something I never thought I'd have again: the possibility of healing. Rebuilding relationships with my family wasn't as simple as accepting their apologies and moving forward. Like a shattered vase that's been glued back together, the cracks would always be visible, a permanent reminder of the damage done. I decided to approach reconciliation methodically, meeting with family members individually, rather than diving back into group gatherings, where old dynamics might resurface. Each conversation was difficult in its own way, requiring me to revisit painful memories while listening to their perspectives with as much openness as I could muster. My first meeting was with Amanda at a neutral coffee shop halfway between Denver and Minneapolis. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. The confident, vibrant sister I'd grown up with had been replaced by someone who seemed smaller somehow, her shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I wouldn't have blamed you if you'd refused." For a moment, neither of us knew what to say. 3 years of silence stretched between us like an uncrossable chasm. "I don't even know where to begin," Amanda finally admitted, her fingers nervously shredding a napkin. "Sorry, seems so inadequate for what I did to you." "Why did you do it?" I asked. It was the question that had haunted me for years. "You knew the truth. You lived it. How could you turn on me like that?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I was broken, Paige. Richard had spent years convincing me that my perceptions couldn't be trusted, that my feelings were always an overreaction. When everything fell apart, I needed someone to blame besides myself. You were the easiest target because you had been right all along, and I couldn't bear to face that." Her honesty surprised me. I'd expected excuses or minimization, not this raw accountability. "Richard encouraged it," she continued. "He saw how I was starting to blame you, and he fed that narrative. Said you'd always been jealous of me, that you'd planted ideas in my head. And I was so desperate to believe our marriage hadn't been a complete lie that I convinced myself he was right." I took a sip of my coffee, trying to steady my emotions. "You didn't just hurt me, Amanda. You destroyed my relationship with our entire family." "I know," she whispered. "And I've spent the last 6 months trying to undo that damage, telling everyone the truth. But I can't give you back those 3 years. I can't undo the pain I caused." Looking at my sister, I saw someone who had been both victim and perpetrator. She had suffered under Richard's manipulation, but she had also chosen to use me as a scapegoat for her pain. Both realities existed simultaneously. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I said honestly. "But I'm willing to try to build something new, something with better boundaries and more truth." Amanda nodded, wiping away tears. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." Over the following months, I had similar conversations with my parents, cousins, and aunts and uncles. Some were genuinely remorseful. Others seemed more concerned with absolving their own guilt than understanding my experience. I set clear boundaries with each of them, making it clear that rebuilding trust would be a slow process, not an overnight reconciliation. Michael supported me through it all, offering both comfort when I needed it and space when emotions became overwhelming. His steady presence reminded me that I wasn't facing this alone, that I had built a life with people who valued me exactly as I was. "I'm proud of you," he told me one evening as we sat on our balcony watching the sunset. "Engaging with your family again would be easier if you just pretended the past never happened, but you're requiring accountability, and that takes courage." 6 months after Jessica's phone call, Michael proposed during a weekend hiking trip in the mountains. As we celebrated our engagement, the question of family involvement in our wedding became unavoidable. "I want them there," I admitted to Dr. Larson during a therapy session, "but I'm afraid of giving them that much importance in my life again. What if they hurt me again?" "That's a valid fear," she acknowledged. "But remember, you're not the same person you were 3 years ago. You have stronger boundaries now. You know you can survive without their approval. That knowledge is your power." With that perspective, I invited my family to the wedding with specific conditions. There would be no speeches from my parents or sister. No pretending we were a perfectly healed family. No pressure for Michael's family to embrace them without knowing our history. The wedding day itself was beautiful in its imperfection. There were awkward moments like when my mother tried to take over certain aspects of the preparation, and I had to firmly remind her of her guest status. There were tender moments, too, like my father's quiet, "I'm sorry," as he walked me down the aisle, and Amanda's tearful smile as she watched from the second row, not as my maid of honor, but simply as an invited guest working to earn back her place in my life. Richard's legal troubles had escalated by then. He'd been sentenced to 8 years in prison for fraud, his carefully constructed facade completely shattered. The news had made local headlines finally exposing his true character to everyone who had once been charmed by him. Amanda had narrowly avoided legal consequences herself, but was struggling financially, slowly rebuilding her life from the wreckage he'd left behind. As Michael and I settled into married life, I continued having difficult but necessary conversations with my parents. We discussed their failure to protect me, their willingness to believe the worst about me, the conditional nature of their love. "We thought we were supporting Amanda," my mother tried to explain during one particularly tense discussion. "We never imagined we were abandoning you in the process." "That's the problem," I replied. "You didn't even consider my side of the story. You chose the more comfortable narrative without questioning it." My father, always less talkative than my mother, surprised me with his insight. "I think we failed both of you," he said quietly. "We failed Amanda by not seeing what kind of man Richard truly was when she brought him home. And we failed you by not trusting the daughter we raised to be honest and caring." That acknowledgement meant more to me than any apology. It showed a level of reflection I hadn't been sure my parents were capable of. Rebuilding these relationships was not a straight line toward healing, but a winding path with setbacks and progress intermingled. Sometimes old patterns would emerge, like my mother's tendency to minimize conflict, or Amanda's occasional defensive reactions. In those moments, I had to decide whether to confront the behavior or let it go, always balancing the desire for authentic connection against the need to protect my own well-being. 3 years after our wedding, Michael and I hosted a family reunion at our home in Denver. It was the first time both sides of our extended families had gathered together, a symbolic blending of my past and present lives. As I watched my cousin's children playing with Michael's nieces and nephews, I felt a bittersweet sense of closure. Amanda approached me as I stood observing the gathering. She looked healthier now, more like her old self. She'd gone back to school, was dating a kind-hearted teacher, and had slowly rebuilt her circle of friends. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if I just listened to you about Richard from the beginning?" she asked. I considered her question carefully. "Sometimes. But then I look at my life now, the strength I've found, the boundaries I've learned to set, even the amazing man I married, and I'm not sure I would change anything." Amanda looked surprised. "Really? After all the pain?" "The pain taught me things I needed to learn," I said simply. "About myself, about love, about forgiveness, about what family really means." And that was perhaps the most profound lesson of this entire journey. True family isn't defined by blood or shared history alone. It's defined by respect, by honesty, by the willingness to hold space for each other's truths, even when they're uncomfortable. It's defined by love that doesn't vanish at the first test of loyalty. My blood relatives were slowly earning their way back into my definition of family. But so were the friends who had stood by me when I was alone, Michael's parents who had welcomed me without reservation, my colleagues who had become confidants, all the people who had seen my worth when those who should have known it best had forgotten. As I looked around at this gathering of people from every chapter of my life, I realized that karma hadn't just struck Richard. It had transformed all of us. It had forced painful but necessary growth. It had revealed the truth not just about one manipulative man, but about the strength and resilience of the woman who had survived his machinations. That woman was me, and while I would never celebrate the pain of those 3 years of exile, I would forever be grateful for the person that pain had helped me become. Have you ever been wrongfully blamed for something and later vindicated? Or have you experienced a family member choosing a toxic partner over you? Share your story in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real life experiences. Remember that sometimes, as in my case, the hardest moments in life can lead to the most profound growth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it brings some comfort if you're going through something similar.